Hey guys, this week we're going to be restoring an old axe. Stick around. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of BS with AJ. As I said before, this week we're going to be restoring an old axe. It was my granddad's axe. It's a double bit axe, and it's obviously seen better days. I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. But if you enjoy videos like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we can do bigger and better projects for you guys. Let's get started, guys. Alright guys, this week we're going to be fixing up or restoring, whatever you want to call it, this axe right here. It's got rust all over the head of it. There's chips in the edges here, and it's also not sharp at all. So we're going to be sanding all that rust off, sharpening up these edges, getting rid of those chips and everything. And we also have to replace the handle because it has cracks in it. And you don't want to use an axe that has cracks in the handles, because if it breaks mid-swing, that's a very dangerous situation. There's been a lot of people that's got hurt that way, so we definitely want to take care of that. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, our first step, we're going to go ahead and sand down all this rust here, get rid of these pits and stuff in the metal, get rid of the nicks on the edges here. We're not going to worry too much about sharpening it right now. We'll go ahead and get rid of all that stuff on the edge and everything, but we'll sharpen it once we actually get the new handle on. But like I said, we're going to do this with the old handle on, just in case, we get to this edge here and we hit the handle. You don't want to mess up your brand new handle, of course. Now, it would work better if you have a vise. I unfortunately don't, so I've got it secured down with a pair of C-grips on my table saw. And as you can see, it's pretty sturdy here. It moves a little bit, but it's not a big deal or anything. So we're going to be using a flopper wheel on our grinder to do this, and we're going to be taking light passes. You don't want to take too much metal off or anything. We're just getting rid of the surface rust and, like I said, fixing these edges. So let's go ahead and get started with that now. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take a Sawzall and cut off the old handle. We're going to cut it off fairly close, and we're going to go ahead and finish taking it out using a hammer and a large punch, knocking it from the top through the bottom. The bottom is slightly wider than the top is. Now you want to keep that in mind while you're doing this, so once you go ahead and cut that off, you need to mark the top part of your head here. Because if you go to put your new handle on and you put it on through the head first, because it's slightly smaller, it's not going to fit as well, and it could come off later. So that's pretty important. I suggest taking a small punch and putting a little dot on the top so you don't get them mixed up. That's something that's not going to come off very easily, so it'll be really quick and easy to identify. So let's go ahead and get started on that now. Alright guys, let's talk about handles for a few minutes. The best two types of wood for a handle is going to be hickory or ash, especially for an axe, but really with any hand tool. Because you're going to be using this axe and putting a lot of force on the handle when you're splitting your wood, you're going to want a very durable, very tough wood, which is why hickory and ash are the best two options. Now, I prefer to have a bare wood handle whenever you're buying them, but not all the stores have bare wood. Whenever you go to buy them, especially in the big box stores, they have a varnish on them. And you don't really want to buy one with a varnish on them because it'll give you blisters, and that's going to end up being a problem down the line. This one did have a varnish on it, so I went ahead and took a orbital sander with 60 grit paper, got all the varnish off, and then I went back over it with 80 grit paper. I did all this off camera because it's pretty boring and long. But I did all this to get all the varnish off and to smooth it down because it was really rough with that varnish on there. And like I said, you don't want to get a lot of blisters, especially if you're going to be splitting wood for a long period of time. So now the next step, we're going to be going ahead and fitting the handle onto our head. Alright, now to fit your handle to your specific head, what we're going to do is make sure you have the bottom of it facing down, of course. I did mark this, like I showed you earlier, with a little spot on the top. So you want to make sure that's facing up, and you'll just set it on there. You don't want to start hammering it down just yet because you want to make sure that seats all the way down, and it may not do that like this. So, we've got that done, and on the handle here, you'll start seeing some shiny spots down towards the bottom. On both sides, probably on these two sides here as well. And what you're going to want to do is sand it very lightly or use a very fine rasp or something like that just to make very light strokes because you want to make sure that seats all the way down. So you don't want a whole lot of resistance because it may not make it all the way down, and you don't want to use something very heavy like a grinder or something to sand away all that wood because you're going to take off too much, and that's both of those are going to make your handle a little bit weaker, and you definitely don't want that with an axe handle. So we're going to take a light rasp and just kind of lightly go over this until we get that seat down all the way. Alright, I went ahead and got it all fit nice and tight off camera to save y'all just watching me do that. So basically, as you see, it's got a little bit to go. Now to actually seat it, what we're going to do is take it and just lift up and have the bottom of our handle hit concrete or something really hard to make sure it seats down all the way. Alright, now that we have our head set on our handle really nice and snug, we're going to go ahead and take the wedge that came with this handle. And the first thing you're going to want to look at is make sure that it's not too wide. It needs to be about the same size, maybe slightly smaller than your handle here. So mine was a little bit large, so I went ahead and cut it down. The next thing you're going to want to do is I went ahead and purchased another wedge set. It's for smaller hammers, but it came with this other wedge. But these are the two things that you need, these two metal wedges. We're going to be using them here in just a few minutes also. We're going to double wedge this. This big wedge is going to go here and put the force out this way. These other two wedges we're going to put in this way, crossing this wedge. So that way it spreads it out this way as well to make sure that it's going to stay on there really nice and tight and there's not going to have any issues at all. So we've already cut this down. We're going to take some wood glue and we're going to put it on the bottom half of this. You want to make sure you get a fairly thick layer and you want to make sure and spread it around a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. You don't want to get it all up through here, up to the top, because you're just going to make a mess. A lot of that you're going to end up cutting off. Alright, so let's go ahead and spread that around. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and grab our hammer. We're going to start this wedge. Make sure you get it in the middle when you start this. Because if it's too far to one side, then it's not going to fit all the way down in there. So now what we're going to do, if you had a vise, you could set your head in there and do this a little easier. But we're just going to do this on the ground. We're going to lightly tap it in here. You want to make sure and get all that excess glue off because you don't want it to get all over your axe head. Alright, now what we're going to do is go ahead and cut off all the excess up here. Now I've drawn a line about an 1/8 inch or so up above this handle, or up above the head. You don't have to do that. You can cut it off flush. You can do however you want to. That's just the way I plan on doing it. I think it'll look a little bit better, but again, that's just personal preference. So we're going to take our Sawzall and cut all that off real quick and sand it down. Alright, now that we have our first wedge in there nice and snug, we sanded it down a little bit, we're going to go ahead and take these metal wedges and put in here. Now if you have a large wedge, you could probably put one in the middle at like an angle or something, but I'm going to use two. I'm going to do them pretty close to the center here. You don't want to get too close to the outside edges and risk that cracking or anything and messing your handle up. So we're going to keep them pretty close here. We're going to center it with our other wedge. Start it just a little bit, make sure you're pretty well centered, which we are. And then we're just going to go ahead and hammer it on down in there. This is when a vise would really come in handy. Right, we got one of them in there. We'll go ahead and do the same thing to our other one here. Nice and centered there. Alright, now what we're going to do is take a center punch here and get it just a little bit below the wood. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and sand that down a little bit again. As you can see, it kind of pushed some of that wood out here, cracked just the very top of it. That's not a major issue or anything. As long as it doesn't crack all the way down through here, then that's not a problem. That's just pushing out the wood, so you're good. We're going to go ahead and sand this down now, make it nice and smooth, and we're going to start finishing our handle. Alright guys, now I went ahead and sanded this down to about 220 by hand. You can probably stop at about 180, but I normally just keep 120 and 220 in the shop, so that's normally what I go to. You want to make sure and use some boiled linseed oil to finish this. I'd like to put about 3 or 4 coats on here, waiting about 15-20 minutes between each coat or so. You want to make sure and cover the entire length of the handle, the very end of it, and don't forget about the very top up here. You don't want to forget about doing that. It will help protect it. It'll keep the wood moist. It'll help protect it all, keep it from cracking and everything. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Put 3 or 4 coats of boiled linseed oil on here. I'm going to be applying it with a paper towel. You can do it with a rag or whatever you got. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright guys, well here's our final product. I went ahead and put 3 coats of boiled linseed oil on there, and I applied it with a paper towel like I showed you, and I waited about 15 minutes or so between each coat just to make sure it had time to soak into the wood. I went ahead and sharpened it off camera. I used a really fine file to do that. So basically this thing's pretty well ready to go. I am going to wait 24 hours to make sure that the glue is set up really good in here. But after that, you should be good to go. Just run out in the yard and start splitting some logs. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we could do bigger and better projects for you guys. And we'll see you next week.